What's up, party people? BV here, and welcome to another episode of Retail Media Vibes, a doing business in Bentonville podcast. I am recording at Podcast Video Studios here in Rogers, Arkansas. As you can see, this is a little bit of a different format than what you're used to for Retail Media Vibes, where I will be doing an interview virtually with my new best friend, Toby Willse. So welcome to the show, Toby. Great to have you here today.
Great to be here. Looking forward to the conversation. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure to get to meet you and get to know you a little bit over the last few months, and learn a little bit about your background and some of the things that you are passionate about here in retail media and just the retail, retail industry in general. So why don't you share with the audience a little bit about yourself and how you found yourself to where you are today?
Yeah. So my background is very much in digital media holistically. I actually went to school for graphic design, which is a little bit tangential, but found myself always really interested in the advertising field and really wanted to get into more of the analytics and the customer facing side. I've always loved to talk to individuals and help them understand how to really articulate what their strategy should be and figure out where things are broken, how to fix them. And so through a decade of working in that industry and getting the opportunities that many don't to be able to work within startups and in large corporations like AOL, I've really been very, very lucky to be able to get to work through the many roles within the industry, working from an entry-level sales planner to today chief media officer at AdFury. So it's been a really wonderful journey.
What was like you said you started off at graphic design, right? So what were some of the things you may have learned in graphic design that you think really set you on your path to in media?
Yeah, it's a great question. When working in that particular field and going through that education process, I always found myself to be very creative first. I'm a visual thinker. I'd like to find, what makes a particular person want to interact with something, whether it be, the objective art on a wall in a museum or the packaging design of a product you find in the store, like a pack of Skittles. I always loved, one of the things that, and this is not a push for this particular product, but one of the things that always really generated my interest in advertising and the creative side of it, and got me into actually graphic design were those ads like the Skittles rainbow commercial when it would rain Skittles. These are the types of things that made me so excited and really made me think like, this is a really cool field. And so through my graphic design education, I essentially found I don't really find my passion is building the creative. My passion is figuring out how is this particular creative going to be situated? Where is it going to target? Who is the consumer I should use this creative for? And how do these creatives bucket together? Because you need so many of them to drive the right story. And that professional work that I got to do within my education allows me to have that keen eye for visual design. And that really set me off into my path for advertising.
I love that. I think there's so many aspects from different parts of our careers that you find these avenues, to express your passions, your excitement, right? I think I would hope that anybody that's in this business of advertising, marketing, retail media, what have you, really wants to be excited about it, right? They probably got into it because they're excited. I know when I transitioned into marketing, I did it because, wow, that's cool. That looks like fun. I want to be involved in brands. I want to do all of those, those amazing things and, have ads, that I've worked on show up at different places and influence people in a good way, of course. And so like, I feel like, that's why a lot of us get into it. Now, you spent your early part of your career at AOL. I'd love for you, I'm guessing that if most of the people that are listening to the podcast at least have heard of AOL, but I mean, AOL was really big, especially in the 2000s. But sounded like you were a little bit on the advertising side. I'd love for you to dig in a little bit on your AOL experience.
Yeah, it was definitely a unique one, and really helped set the stage for what I would do in the future and where my passion would be. At AOL, it was actually really interesting to see some of the newer features they worked on and, where they were excelling in the advertising space. but then some of those, kind of core competencies that they were always known for that shocked me that they still existed at that time. When I was at AOL, I always remember one of the first statistics that was given to me was that over 6 million users still use their dial-up connection capability.
Yeah, and they're just shutting that down, right?
And they just shut that down. So that always shocked me. But their advertising is what really kept them going. They had a large publisher network, a great connection to a lot of different very large brands. And more importantly than that, they did the right acquisitions. I actually started very, very early on at Millennial Media, which was a ad tech provider for essentially a supplier for placements on app. They were one of the first app suppliers for app advertising. And so that got acquired by AOL, which brought me over to AOL. I like to joke even today that AOL is it's the cockroach of advertising, and that sounds bad, but it's actually a good thing. They refuse to die. It does not matter how things evolve. It does not matter how the landscape changes. They are still around, and they will continue to be around.
Yeah, and I also would imagine that a company like AOL has a treasure trove of data that is very of interest to a lot of advertisers and other companies as well, right?
Exactly. Yeah, a massive amount of user data, an absurd selection of the ability to target different users and be able to do some geo-targeting that I actually haven't seen in a lot of other advertising agencies even today. This was, 10 years ago. And today that all rolls into what everyone knows as Yahoo. And Yahoo now has all of those capabilities and those feature sets as AOL did multiple acquisitions and multiple mergers.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting. All right, let's do a couple little fun questions as well to get to know you a little bit more. So, all right, so Toby, what's your morning routine? What does morning look like for Toby?
Yeah, so I have a 4-year-old at home. So my mornings
are right there.
Yeah, my mornings are typically wake up with him. I do mornings with him. He's big energy in the mornings. At least 2 cups of coffee, maybe a Wordle to get my brain started, and then diving into what's happening in the advertising space. What really gets me energized every morning is a cup of coffee and the ability to just read some blogs and some articles and catch up, because it's a lot to take in every day. It's changing constantly.
Yeah, that's great, because I had a coffee with a student from University of Arkansas here just recently, and she was talking about what she was looking to do in the next stage of her career, or basically starting her career. And she asked me for some tips, and one of the tips I said was, like, you've got to be immersed in the industry that you're going to get into. So if you're going to be in media, you've got to spend time with it every single day. Whether it's watching YouTube videos, whether it's listening to podcasts, reading blogs, and sign up, reading newsletters, whatever that looks like for you, based upon how you like to get your information, you've got to do that. And you have to think critically about some of those things. I think also, I've always talked about, like, leaning back and leaning forward. Like, if you're leaning back, you're kind of just casually taking in information. But if you're leaning forward, you're more actively and critically thinking about what you're reading and trying to really comprehend and think through what the possibilities are. I think, even understanding and taking in that information in more of a lean forward action versus a lean back is absolutely important as well. And so whether that happens for you first moments of the day, or it happens to you right before you go to bed at night, which a lot of people say don't take in that blue screen light before you go to bed, but what have you anyway, or you do it at lunch, right? So it depends on where you get that. So do you listen to music? Do you have a playlist? What kind of jams do you listen to that get you going in the day?
I love that question. So yeah, in the vein of personal about Toby, I'm a huge music lover, big collector of vinyl, which I know you and I have bonded over a little bit in the past. And so I tend to lean towards classic rock, older music, typically in the 70s era. I'm
listening to a yacht rock playlist right now. It's like 70s soft rock, 70s, 80s soft rock right now that I'm just enjoying quite a bit, actually.
It gets me energized every time. A little bit of, like, Electric Light Orchestra or Moody Blues always puts me in the right mood. But I've been recently... Oh, go ahead.
No, I just said a little Ambrosia.
Yeah, a little Ambrosia in there. Always gets. I've got three albums from Ambrosia, and I listen to it quite a bit. The what's really got me excited though recently, as a Spotify user as well, is I've discovered that day lists are pretty accurate to me. So I'll often do my morning day list. It tends to work pretty well for me, particularly in the mornings. They really nailed it.
Awesome. Well, it's great to get to know you. We're gonna obviously get to know you a bit more as we talk through some things here in this episode. But wanted to jump into a little bit more around the retail media space. Again, you've got a extensive background. You've been in media for quite a long time. You've been working in this space for a bit. So I think the audience would really love to hear from you on some of your philosophies and how you approach retail media specifically, which has been the world that you've been in extensively over the last few years for sure. So when we think about retail media and kind of its evolution, what does really feel like were really the big changes in retail media that have really influenced this acceleration that we've seen over the last few years? I'd love to hear more about that for you.
My general POV on retail media is really the expansion of advertising capability throughout the different platforms and the very intelligent aggregation of some of those platforms into unique tech providers. I think that retail media as a whole is going to continue to grow pretty rapidly, but I do think that there's a lot of headwinds that it faces, with a lot of tailwinds as well. For me, when I think about the way that it all comes together and what I think is success within the digital media and retail media landscape is being able to understand, which is a very challenging right now for so many brands and agencies, where all of these things intrinsically click together and where silos need to be removed. I think it's probably one of the biggest blockers today for retail media is a lot of that siloed nature within the space, both within agencies and brands. And it prevents what could be a much more personalized user experience for the consumer, but also for the brand, and creating much more efficiency. So I get a lot of energy helping brands understand where they need to adjust their retail media strategies to be much more thoughtful with their ad dollars and be less myopic to how do I make X retailer succeed, and more big picture of how do I make my brand succeed.
Yeah, it's very interesting too, because as retail media budgets have continued to expand, brands obviously want to have a lot more control over how that money is spent. And obviously there's, a lot of discussion. We'll talk about measurement a little bit later on, but there's a lot about measurement and so forth. But it is interesting to me because, retail media has been around for a while. There's been, we've had Triad Retail Media that used to do advertising on with Walmart Connect, or well, it's not Walmart, it wasn't Walmart Connect at the time, but they were doing it for
Walmart Media Group back then. I do believe they might not have
they've had a few iterations for sure. And then Amazon, like everybody's had media, right? But the budgets and what people were spending, and like nobody really cared too much. But now there's this proliferation of all these different tactics, and spends continue. And I was like, oh, wait a second, this is impacting my budget now because a lot of these dollars. And so like the conversations that I've had quite a bit recently, or we'll say over the last year or so, is really about trying to get the customer teams or the retail teams on the same page with the brand teams. And there's seems to be not necessarily friction, but a lot of times misunderstanding of what it takes to perform on retail. What has your experience been on? And I know you said, you really enjoy trying to get brands understanding the space, but like, what have you seen and heard from your experience that really helps get everyone on the same page on what the true opportunities are?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I'm very curious of your perspective of this. The way that I find that in my experience that brands and sales have been able to get into a better rhythm, and it's not always perfect, tends to be a greater understanding of the space and what it means to be in store versus on the digital shelf, and what are the levers that can be pulled to help juice that particular impact and the relationships necessary. Often the two teams tend to disagree or have that friction because there's two different focus points: relationship and sales growth. And one team is very focused on, I need to grow my sales for very particular items or for my portfolio. The other team is very focused on, I need to maintain my relationship with these merchants and this retailer. I need to ensure that I'm driving the right traffic to this retailer, and it's our premier channel. often that is driven by the siloed natures of brand setup. Brands set up their teams to be focused on particular retailers or particular advertising avenues. And unfortunately, that creates artificial silos when they're not speaking. Many of these brands rely on large agencies, holding companies, etc., to do that for them and find the menagerie and help them create that justification. Unfortunately, that doesn't often work as well as they'd like, and we've seen that. That's why this model's existed for so long, and it's why the space is continuing to evolve. It wouldn't be evolving on how teams work together and how agencies interact if it was perfected. Right. So that is where I've seen brands succeed and where I've seen agencies succeed, is removing the person X will handle this for me and saying, we need to figure out the crux of the issue and bring these teams together and still offer and allow the capability for these different brands and these different team members to be able to focus on their core competencies or their core responsibilities, but understand that camaraderie and teamwork is needed here to ensure that the communication streams are consistent and that these different individual teams are operating holistically versus singularity. And then you come to a bottle of the funnel where everything starts to crowd together, and now you have disjointed strategies and what effectively becomes very inefficient ad spend and often creative visuals. How do you feel? Have you seen them be somewhat similar?
Yeah, and I think I think it's one of those things where, conversations have to continue, and everybody, it takes time, right? It takes time to absorb, the true opportunity. Plus, you're trying to get your arms around something that's growing immensely, and the demands are increasing. The JBP commitments are continuing to increase. They're wanting more. And I think you hit on something early on in your response which is really important, because there's sales and there's a relationship, right? There's, a return that drives the business from a numbers perspective. And then there's drives the business because of a relationship, right? So there's, and we used to call that return on relationship. The challenge is it's hard to quantify return on relationship, but to be honest, that might be the most impactful way that you drive your business. If you are building the right relationship with, your merchant, and you are, doing the things that the retailer needs you to do. And obviously there's got to be a give and take. So I'm not saying you just say okay to everything, but there's a lot of give and take, and you have a lot of good communication. I think that goes a long way to things that aren't always as clear as, I saw an ad, and since I saw that ad, I resulted in this sale at this retailer at this moment, right? So, but everybody loves that, right? And that's why everybody loves retail media, because the idea is you can measure all of that, which again, we'll talk about measurement later on, but that's obviously not always the case. So, it is still, I think, a work in progress. I think as brands understand and they get more involved in the space and they have an understanding. And I would also encourage brands that may not necessarily have access to a specific retailer because of their location or whatever, to go and visit that retailer and go on a store walk with somebody. And at least, and I understand we talk a lot about e-commerce, but I think you can get a lot of perspective about e-commerce by walking the store. And so, because it is a multi-channel experience for most shoppers, right? Omni-channel, right? So it's a multi-channel experience. So you have to understand the store. You have to even do a site walk, right? So do a site walk, and which is probably a little more convenient than finding a store and going there if it's not in your area. But I think, having some of those experiences definitely will, help that understanding between brand and customer team, or brand and retail team, in order to really drive some of the opportunities, because those are the things that happen in the margins, right? It's like, these are the things, because we feel good and we work together, we trust each other, we are all trying to be on the same page. Those are the things that come together because of some of these other activities like site walks and store walks, and having conversations, having lunch, talking about these things. And so it's still a very relational business, even if we're talking about dollars or ones and zeros, right?
Couldn't agree more. And I think that, when you think about that, like the other side of the spectrum is for, that's as you go to the more of the sales team, and you think about, and the, e-commerce teams, depending on the company you're talking about, oftentimes one of the things that's also really good to put yourself in, particularly for a brand team, take one step back and think to yourself, particularly if you're in charge of certain retailers or segments, what is actually going to drive a consumer to purchase? And again, not looking myopically to the retailer, but thinking greater scheme of your brand. what is going to drive a consumer to purchase, and where is their channel overlap? All of us shop at multiple stores, right? And so what I found is one of the biggest blockers as well, for brands, and where they struggle, again, with those team conflicts, is when to invest in retail media and when to start to use those investments. And of course, to a comment you made, every retailer is going to say, oh, you got to be investing here. You got to be putting money into the platform. It's totally worth it. You should see our user base. So true, right? But guess what? The user base for Walmart is often overlapping with the user base for Kroger. It depends on the region. Where do you see, what grocery stores do you shop at? In Bentonville, you probably aren't overlapping too heavily with a lot of other grocers because Walmart is the main grocer available. But here in Baltimore, I have 16 different grocery stores within a 10-mile radius of me, not even including Walmart, right? So my overlap is dramatic. And that means that you don't need to target me across 7 different retailers. You hit me on one, and you've now captured my interest, and I might go purchase it at a different retailer. But when you look at the bottom line, you made the sale, you captured the consumer, and you made the conversion, and you've built loyalty. And so I think taking that step back often helps teams better coordinate, because you stop saying, well, I have to have this investment in this brand. My retailer is the one that's important. And instead you say, this retailer is really going to help us, and this is why, to accelerate the brand holistically. And now you're making an investment decision that's much more thoughtful and more aligned to the entire team versus creating that conflict.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I feel like we could talk about this for hours, but we're gonna get to a few other topics. So this next topic. So CES concluded recently, and so CES is always an interesting one, right? It's the first really big conference starting the new year. It's the Consumer Electronics Show. It's been mostly known over the years for, TVs and electronics and iPhone cases and all of that stuff, right? But it's really started to become more, retail media has really started to become a lot more involved in CES. I was at CES last year in the ARIA. I had, Walmart Connect was there, Instacart was there. There was a lot of conversations, a lot of sessions that were taking place that were very retail media focused. So, why do you think there's such a strong presence for retail media at, a conference like CES, which is known for electronics?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's an interesting one. It's definitely perspective based. To me, I think it really is driven by brand location. You have this opportunity at the top of the year when often a lot of vendor negotiations haven't completed, agency negotiations haven't completed. Agencies are deep in hunt mode for their next big client relationship, and at CES, a lot of the largest opportunities exist there, particularly opportunities that are much harder for retail media today. Retail media was born and grown more effectively on CPG, right? And so CPG is one that has a very different strategy and a very different approach than any kind of hardline, which is, CES's bread and butter. And so brands, I think, are more effectively starting to take up CES with agencies, because agencies now have this opportunity to showcase why they can help support a hardline client with their needs through retail media, where all of a sudden these CES brands are starting to be much more effectively online than just in store in the core retailers. Then secondarily, it's all about those vendor relationships. Previously at CES, you would rarely see an Amazon or an Instacart at CES, and now they're all there in force. And that's because of those vendor relationships and those negotiations they want to start. There's a reason why I've always noticed that you mentioned the ARIA. They're always very separate. The actual CES entire landscape and the show floor is 30 minutes down the strip from where all of the e-commerce work is. You ask 80% of the people who sit in digital media and e-commerce, did you go see the show floor where you were at CES? All of them say no. We never made it.
It's hard.
Never got out of the ARIA.
That was my challenge last year, because there were sessions all over the place that I wanted to attend, or places I wanted to be, and so just even getting an Uber or the monorail or whatever to get from one place to another. I mean, it takes so much time that you miss the session by the time you got from one place to the other. And you're right. I did cover all of it last year, and I got quite a few steps in. Let's put it that way, right? So like just from, obviously the news around CES is kind of percolating right now. So what were some of the things that you kind of heard about or saw related to CES? I think that could impact our business in the year to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the outside of the technology that was released within the CES show floor, many of which are, I think, going to impact our industry more so from a sense of, what are the hot products, where are consumers buying, consumer, sentiment and shopping habit. I do think that's going to impact things. But for us and, more directly related to retail media, I think some of the biggest things that I saw released that I'm really excited about are some network releases and new feature sets that I think are going to create some competition, particularly within the programmatic space. Reddit creating their own ad network, while seeming small, in the grand scheme of things, because many are creating their own ad networks. Reddit is massive. Reddit is where a large portion of LLM data is housed right now, where it is pulled from. It is one
Scary
of the largest.
In some ways.
Yeah.
Very scary in some ways.
Very scary how big Reddit is now. And so for Reddit to release their own advertising platform and your ability to advertise directly within that ecosystem versus having to use a programmatic partner, which is today the only real option to hit Reddit more aggressively, I think is going to be a bit of a disruptor. Secondarily, the thing that's obviously very exciting that on everyone's mind is, AI based work, agentic commerce, and AI agents. And many of the holdcos released their own AI news, which was big and I think will impact different relationships and what brands need more effectively, because brands are going to start to choose their holding relationship based on the AI technology available, because each have very different offerings today. They will become more merged over time, but right now they are very unique. But I think more holistically to everybody, it's the retailer AI capabilities that they're integrating with and the way that agentic commerce is shaping up. I think Google's new protocol and Walmart's and Target's partnership with them was a pretty massive announcement. Now that came slightly after CES during NRF, but they all kind of merged together. We're talking days difference.
Are we able to call a winner now? Google is now the winner of AI shopping. Are we able to do that yet?
If you heard anybody, if any of the other AIs heard us say that, they'd be like, that is not true. You are jumping the gun. But I think realistically, Google is likely going to eat this up. It's going to be just like the search bar wars. Bing exists today. There are other search bars out there, but not many people use Bing. Google holds the candle there. If you go out of country, you start to see Bing being more aggressively utilized due to security features. And I think the same thing's going to be here, where we'll see the other AIs continue to be effective and utilized, because a combative market is what's going to create the best consumer experience, frankly. I don't want Google to own everything, because if they do, you remove the ability for the consumer to get exactly what they want. However, I do think Google stands to own this. They have the infrastructure. They have their own supply pipeline to be able to actually make their AI function more appropriately through data centers, whereas everybody else has to partner.
Yeah, I mean, the comeback for Google, right? So, I use ChatGPT every single day, right? So that's my number one go-to. Google Gemini is my second. And then I tinker with the others. Where Google was, we'll say 2 years ago, compared to where ChatGPT and OpenAI were at that time, and to continue to push, you just wondered, was Google ever going to catch up? I would say that this is definitely it is a notable comeback by Google into this space. You are absolutely right. They have 100% a chance to win, or the right to win, because of their infrastructure, the number of people who have Chrome browsers, the amount of data that they have, the access to your email. Who doesn't have a Gmail account, right? Like, they have all of this access, while ChatGPT and OpenAI have to go and collect this, right? And at the end of the day, the shopper, wants friction free, right? So if they're a ChatGPT shopper, definitely they want to be able to shop and buy through that app. If you're a Google user and you're in Google, and it doesn't mean you're not both, right? You could be a Google user and you could also be a ChatGPT user. You just want that streamlined functionality to be able to discover and purchase all within that environment, whichever environment you're working at. So I kind of put some of the Google, I almost say the Google comeback at this point is reminiscent of the comeback by the QR code, right? Was there any bigger comeback than the QR code in the space? I highly doubt it. But I do think Google definitely is rivaling that on obviously a much bigger scale.
I very much agree. I mean, I couldn't tell you how frequently I used Gemini before Gemini 3 released. It was very infrequent. I was much more heavily leaned into ChatGPT and Claude. I find Claude to be exceptionally powerful for anything that involves, any type of math or analytics. It's also much more data secure. So I'm a big Claude fan for those reasons. But when Gemini 3 came out, it really killed my usage of ChatGPT. I still use it fairly frequently, but Gemini 3 tends to have better answers. It hallucinates less often, and I'm able to guide it to do more data analysis. I mean, we could have an entire conversation and get the right information online. We could have a whole conversation about, the falsehoods of AI today and where it still struggles. And how users need to use it, because I think that's also, a very scary thing, is the fact that today AI, very similar to when people search things on Google, and there's always been that expression for the last 15 years, don't believe everything you see on the internet. That could not be more true of AI. And the problem is that people trust AI because supposedly it's searching the web for you. It's doing the work for you. And so you believe what it's telling you. But as advertising gets into AI, as you start to see ads, particularly in the retail media space and AI, all of a sudden what's being suggested to you could be a paid placement. It could just be a partnership. AI has that particular company, Gemini or ChatGPT, have a greater relationship with those particular retailers or those websites. And so you start to really have to have this fine line of, is what's being provided to me really the best option if I'm looking for a product? Or am I just being given the options that the AI recommends? You can avoid it. You can prompt properly to get what you want. But a lot of users don't know that. They just take for granted exactly what's given to them at face value. And I think that's where, for me, Google has done a better job of giving you a face value proposition that is more factual than ChatGPT has. And that's why I'm very bullish on what Google's doing right now with Gemini.
Yeah, for sure. I think the wave of advertising is coming for sure in the space. I have no doubt in my mind. I recently saw an article about Walmart testing sponsored prompts within their Sparky chat interface, as well as they're doing some testing there. So, I think there's a lot of work being done to try to figure out what is the right advertising format, and something that's not necessarily going to be super, I don't want to say disruptive, because all advertising should be disruptive, but disruptive to the shopper experience, right? So, not necessarily make it feel like so in your face. I think that's going to be important through that process as well. So I imagine AI is going to be part of this answer, but what are some of the things you think about for the year ahead with retail media, and what we can expect? I think I just touched on a couple of things, but what are some of your thoughts on where things go with AI and retail, or just retail media in general?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think some of the exciting ones that I think will make an impact this year, and it's not just smoke and mirrors or clout, is going to be agentic commerce and the way it is utilized. I think we'll start to see a lot more consumer buying directly through the platform, and much better articulation from the AI to help guide the consumer to make their purchase. I also think that what we're going to see a lot more of is the integration of AI agents into agencies and brands. I think frankly, I think that's the big one that's going to happen most this year, is that agentic commerce is just going to continue to evolve from where it was. It's evolving rapidly, but it was already in this state, call it Q4 of last year. It was starting to move in this direction more aggressively. That trajectory will continue. We'll see advertising come in. I do think when advertising comes in, there's going to be a massive conversation about user privacy, data security. Right now, I personally wouldn't advertise on an LLM. If I had the opportunity, maybe within a closed door one like Sparky or Rufus. Outside of that, I would be very careful about that if I were a brand, because the data security that needs to exist really doesn't today. And I personally would be very nervous about that. So I think where you're going to see more of it this year is they work through some of those idiosyncrasies, which I think will take some time, and we'll start to really see that rise in 2027. This year, I think it's going to be agencies and brands taking AI technology in and starting to actually utilize it. So many brands I speak to often tell me we haven't really started to bring in AI yet. We leverage blank technology provider, and they have an AI tool we use. Or some of the other ones, and these are the ones that have a lot of work to do, have stipulations that their team members can't even use AI. They cannot access a ChatGPT or a Gemini or an internal tool set that's been developed. So I think agents are going to become much more consistent, where instead of just having a conversation, you're going to see actual AI agents that perform the automation for you, perform the task. And that's going to be something that's going to be much more seen and consistently utilized throughout each and every brand and agency provider that we see in the space. There's also going to be a lot of consolidation. There's 70,000 AI startups that exist right now in some capacity. And I think that you're going to see a lot of these AI agents. Of course, many of them in these companies will fail, but I also think a lot of these companies are going to get gobbled up this year. And you're going to see a lot of integration because so many different users are creating different tool sets with such a powerful baseline. And so you're going to see many agencies, many brands say, why would I rebuild this? This has just been built. It's amazing. It's excellent. And they're going to purchase that and bring that in. So I think a lot of consolidation and acquisition is going to occur this year.
Yeah, to your point about brand use with AI. I was in a conversation just yesterday with a brand, and we were talking to them about their AI usage, and they said, "Well, we have Copilot, and that is their AI solution. They're not using AI in any other way. They have Copilot." When I had access to Copilot, and I don't use Copilot nearly as much as any of the other platforms, but it always, especially in the enterprise case, always seemed very watered down and very difficult to truly get productive with it. But here's the thing, though. As soon as you go to your home computer, you can use whatever you want. So I do think there's going to have to be some, I don't want to say a reckoning necessarily, but there's going to have to be something that's going to happen where, and I'm not, trust me, anybody that's watching or listening, I'm not advocating that you take your work information and you put it on your home computer and use AI against your company's policy. So just want to get that clear. But with AI being so much a part of it's in your phone, or will be in your phone if it's not there already. It's in your home life. Like, it's going to be hard not to have AI involved in whatever work you're doing in some way, shape, or form in the year to come. So I do think brands are going to have to figure that part out and make those tools a little bit more accessible, and then also provide the right type of training to go from a level 1 user to just get them to a level 2 user. Everybody's pretty much, everybody I talk to, 90% or more of marketers are at that level 1 where they're just, they have they put in a single prompt and they get a single response, and maybe they go back and forth a little bit, and then that's it. They don't, that's the end. So I do think that there's a huge opportunity in that space.
Could not agree more. I think one of the things that I think is really that you mentioned that I just wanted to hit on real fast, that I think is very pertinent, is the take-homing of work and then using a separate laptop. You joked and you were very clear. Not recommending that.
Not recommending. No, please, big disclaimer here.
Yeah, could not agree with that more. But brands need to realize it's happening. They are pulling wool over their own eyes if they think that their team members aren't doing that, because it makes their lives easier. Brands are much more future forward, and frankly, they create better data security if they create their own in-house LLM arena and ability to use their own use LLMs within their technology or within their security parameters, than to just poo-poo the whole thing and create restrictions and inability. Because what's going to naturally happen is you are going to have team members that take it home, and then you create liabilities that are much harder to deal with because these liabilities are now adjacent from your actual work.
Absolutely. So we'll see what happens there. It'll be very, very, very interesting. I'm glad I work for an AI company where I don't have to worry about that.
Me too.
All right, let's touch on measurement, right? We've referred to it a couple of times. It's always usually that and agentic shopping, AI shopping is always a big conversation on this podcast, but measurement has become one as well. I'd love to hear a little bit about your philosophy with measurement. As I've talked about a lot, the measurement story really has become one that is very data focused, very performance oriented type of measurement, and not all channels within the retail media ecosystem are as easily measured as you would have with, let's say a sponsored placement with inside of an in-grid on a search, right, on Walmart.com or Amazon or Target or whomever, right? And so I think everybody's had fallen in love with that measurement of that direct last click attribution honestly during COVID, right? When everybody was locked down, e-commerce blew up, right? Everybody got high on that measurement. Well, then the expectation is, well, if it's retail media, they all should be able to be measured that way. Not such the case in some of the channels, and we've talked about that. But I'd love to hear what your philosophy is on measurement and how you've had those conversations with brands that you've worked with.
Yeah, it's a really good question and a very complicated answer because I don't think there is really a right answer.
I only bring complicated questions.
To me, I think that when you look at measurement, one of the biggest things you need to look at is what are you actually trying to achieve first and foremost? What is your goal? And so many brands don't actually know what their goal is. They will say, oh, well, I'm trying to bring in more loyalty. I'm trying to build household penetration. I want to increase my market share. And then you say, okay, so that's your goal. What are you measuring against? Sales of the retailer. My answer immediately is, well, you're not going to ever get a clear measurement story. You're looking at two very unique data streams and you're trying to connect them together and say this indicates X indicates Y, right? And they don't. They don't intrinsically play together. You then have to just make this even muddier by layering in the fact that most brands, especially large brands, still leverage very, very old and archaic modeling. And while it has evolved in a lot of different ways, many brands have created their own models that are evolved to layer in e-commerce insights, things of that nature, and those data sets that didn't exist before, as you mentioned. It's not a perfect science. And unfortunately, that means that there are multiple different ways to measure today and multiple different viewpoints on what the right measurement is, but none of them really tell the whole story. To me, the best way you can measure is still a very classical approach. You need to take all your potential impactors to what would drive your growth, your KPI that you're looking for, and you need to then marry it across your overall sales and then your channel sales. And you need to view each of those uniquely and individually, but then look at them at the holistic level and be able to actually see the trajectory change of your total sales volume, your unit volume, your market share, whatever KPI you're looking at, based on all of those different factors and those impactors. I think today nobody really does that. They look at them all siloed. They try to use AMC. Like AMC is so powerful and it's so impressive. And I love the tool. But AMC is not a solve-all. A lot of agencies, a lot of brands claim it is. They act like it is. It's a very, very powerful.
Because they want it to be the answer, right? Because
they want it to be the answer. Everyone wants to say we have the answer. Yeah, right? There is no answer. There's never going to be an answer to measurement. The day that measurement is fully solved and we did it, it's solved, we figured it out, is the day that you and I don't have jobs anymore. It's not going to happen. Not in our lifetime. It will always be a very subjective conversation.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest when I think about measurement and one of the challenges with measurement, I think one of the biggest challenges is the word and. I want to measure this and I want to measure that. Or my objective, even worse. Like my objective is this and that and this other thing, right? So you've got 3 or 4 things you're conjoining together and expecting to be able to show some sort of relationship that drove the outcome that you are expecting. And, the more ands you add to whatever you are trying to achieve, the more difficult it will be to measure, right? So, but it's hard, right? Because you want to try to reduce that. You want to make it a much more of a finite measurement strategy, and it's hard, right? Because I get it. Like, of course you want new to brand. Of course you want more, sales. Of course you want to build awareness, right? But all of those things, to your point, aren't all measured the same way. They have different ways in which you accomplish them. And so if you are looking at it as a holistic objective or a holistic goal, you're probably not going to fully be satisfied with what you are being told at the end of a campaign.
Yeah, I think you really hit something hard with the end of it all. You're so right that oftentimes the goals conflict so heavily with one another when you say end and end and end, that you no longer have a clear strategy. I mean, we could tangent so hard on this, but I'll keep it very short and sweet. One of the major conversation factors coming out of CES, going back to our original topic here, is the collapsing of the marketing funnel, and that you now CTV can be more of a conversion play. And I personally have a bit of a gripe with that, because while I think that is true, you create more capability with some of your other advertising tactics, and you now have multiple avenues for the consumer to go. So instead of having to go a singular approach, you can take tangential approaches to the funnel now. I don't think that means the funnel's collapsing. I think you're being far too overly broad when you say that, and I think it confuses brands.
Because it's a very myopic point of view, for sure.
Exactly. Many brands, to what you just said earlier, they're only so deep into this. And so when they read these things online, they read these things in articles, they see it announced in CES, they see so-called experts on LinkedIn claiming these things as well. It's frustrating for me, because it's confusing brands, and it only creates more of this silo issue we started this conversation with. So to me, I think one of the biggest takeaways I would want to say just very rapidly to anyone listening to me, in my opinions here right now, is don't believe that hype of the collapsing marketing funnel. Instead, think of it as a marketing funnel that now has tangential ways to hit the conversion space of the funnel, the bottom of the funnel, without having to go through the entire thing. Doesn't mean it's collapsing. It just means that there's now alternate avenues. I think that's a better way to think about it, because when you think about it that way, you realize you still need to have a very clear and structured marketing strategy, but you now have opportunities and options at your disposal to create alternate avenues to get your consumer to get to the bottom of that funnel.
By putting a QR code on your connected TV ad does not make it a conversion tactic.
Correct. Or being able to click on it and it takes you to Instacart.
Depending on the system you're using, whether it's got a button or not, it is still an awareness tactic. You're still trying to tell a story. You're still trying to build your brand. You are still trying to educate on your product, right? Yes, you are providing an opportunity for if somebody is ready to purchase, yes, you are opening up that opportunity for that transaction to take place. But they also still have to be very motivated to do that. So you have to have done a lot of work before they get to that step. Very rarely in the worlds that we work in CPG and some of the brands, that is somebody that motivated to stop that ad mid-ad for laundry detergent, scan, oh yeah, I need to get that laundry detergent now, and scan that QR code. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't happen. I contend it's probably a bunch of marketers that are doing it, but you know what I'm saying? It's still like, I think your influence on sales from that connected TV ad is going to be well beyond, and it's a multi-channel story, as we've talked about before, the number of scans you get on that QR code and the number of add to carts.
Correct. And I think that's exactly what you said is just nail on the head. Is for the takeaway is, don't change your KPIs. We go back to measurement. Your measurements for these types of ads should never be how many people scanned that QR code or clicked that buy button, because you immediately put yourself in a position of failure.
Again, it's a great place to tell your story, and there's definitely a place for that to occur. But just because you can add to cart directly from it doesn't necessarily mean it's a conversion. It's a conversion tactic. So, all right. So we got to move on, but good conversation. So let's play the magic wand game for a second, right? So we've talked about a lot of stuff in the retail media space. I love the magic wand game because there's no reality. So the magic wand game is, if you could wave a magic wand and fix, systematic issue with retail media today, what would your wish be? You got one wish, Toby. You got one wave of the wand. What would you try to fix?
It's a tough question because there's so many things to fix. You could say measurement, right? But for me, I think it would probably be the walled gardens. If I could fix something, there's so many I would want to fix, but if I could just wave a magic wand and it would be the most impactful for everybody, it would be removing walled gardens from different agency and retailer landscapes and allowing user data to be more adaptable and available to brands and just advertisers to leverage. Because today I think those walled gardens, frankly, create a lot of the siloed issues that we talked about throughout our conversation, and they are the nexus point of it. And so if we could remove that, you often solve a lot of the other problems that my magic wand would want to solve. But if I solve this one, I'm arguably solving a few of the others.
No, that absolutely love that, because it feels like it has an opportunity to be, a much broader opportunity to, fix some of these challenges that we've hit on today. All right, cool. All right, so Retail Media Vibes is really, part of this programming has been based upon the human side of what we do on the day-to-day basis. And, you've been in the space a long time. You've been a manager and a leader. I've been in the space a long time. I've been a manager and leader. We've seen kind of how things have evolved over our tenures in our respective roles and companies that we've worked at. And for me, one of the challenges that I've seen is just like the expansion of retail media and the amount of work and grind that I think a lot of people experience in this space. Like the pressure in retail media. I mean, I would say media and marketing in general that exists, but I think retail media it ratchets it up a bit, because you have typically so many different retailers. We've talked about so many different channels. You have pressures on the retailer side, you have pressures on the brand side, and I think there's a lot of overwhelm that exists, I think, in this space. And I talk to a lot of people who are either on the brink of burnout, or they have in the past, and trying to get back into it, or have left the industry in general, right? And that's not great for us. Like, having people who are well experienced and they're leaving this world of retail media makes it tough, because this world is expanding. Retail media is continuing to expand. So my question to you is, like, in this world where there is all this pressure around retail media, what your experiences have been, and how have you advised people who have worked with you or worked for you on how to handle some of the pressures from the speed of retail?
Yeah, it's a really good question. One of my favorite parts about the job is being a mentor and helping train individuals. I was very lucky that I had a lot of good mentors throughout my career. And what I try to tell anybody, whether they be someone directly under me and on my team, or someone in the space that I know, or even don't know, and they just reach out and want to talk, is it's almost like being a doctor at this point. And I know that's such a weird comparison point, because we're not saving lives. We certainly are not. But what we are doing is
remind my team of that quite often.
But what we do have to do constantly is keep up with it. If you're a doctor and you don't keep up with medical releases, medical journals, etc., in 5 years, you won't even be able to keep your license. You will lose it. You will lose your ability to practice medicine, because it evolves so rapidly. And I would say that that's very similar to advertising, unfortunately, for us in the digital space, is that you have to stay on top of it, or you will become outdated very quickly. And that's hard. It's really hard, especially because when you think about, if you're a social commerce advertiser, you have a very myopic focus. It's social. It is, whether it be the content creation side, the influencer side, the marketing side, it's social, right? Same thing with national media. It's consistently been the same thing for years. While it's evolving what you can do with national media, the concept is the same. You are working within it. Retail media is this weird spider web. It now touches everything. It needs to play nice with national. It needs to play nice with social. Social needs to be able to drive to retailers, where you need to have your retail media ready to capture that consumer when they get there. So all of a sudden, if you work in the retail media space, you have to kind of know it all and do it all, at least lightly, or you're going to fail. And that makes it undeniably difficult. And so for anybody out there who's in that position, it's all about taking a step back and saying, I am a human. I can only do so much. My job is to be the smartest I possibly can be at this and focus on the retail media aspects and make sure I understand the greater ecosystem. But I don't need to be an expert in it. I just need to understand it. How do they all play together? For leaders in the agency space and in the brand space who have these people on their teams and have, of course, high expectations, it's remembering again that they are human and that you need to create automation processes. You need to use, this is where AI is going to be the most helpful, in my opinion, in this year, is going to be how can AI help retail media in particular and e-commerce be able to become much more of a systemized process and speak to the other avenues of advertising, social, national, etc., out of home, and be able to do that in a more automated fashion so that your team members, your strategists can focus on what really matters, which is how do these marry together? What is my strategy for retail media? And how do I communicate that appropriately, but in a more automated approach with my peers?
Yeah. Yeah. For me, with the individuals that I've worked with, it's about, for me, been about empathy, having an empathetic conversation with them, trying to understand what their struggles are and trying to, to do the best you can in order to solve those challenges. And I think that's sometimes that's helpful, right? But at the end of the day too, it's also, you have to figure out ways to take action. I do think, not to say that AI is the answer for everything, but I do think that AI can definitely help with reduction of the mental load to give you more space to do, other things or think deeply or continue to research. So I do think there's some opportunity to reduce the overwhelm with AI. And I think that's, what a lot of people are actually, hoping for and looking for in the promise of the AI to come, for sure. So good stuff. I appreciate you, Chase, sharing your perspective on that. So
of course, yeah, and I couldn't agree with you more. I think anyone who's like scared of AI, it's right to be a little fearful of it. But I do think that it will naturally actually help our jobs be easier as advertisers and as marketers versus replacing you. I think it could arguably replace more of the transactional lever pulling, but that doesn't replace the human. It just upscales the human into a different role.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. So appreciate you sharing your thoughts and your opinions. Love all the answers. And I'm sure our audience has as well. So we're going to get into bold vibes, which is, one of the ways we like to kind of conclude here on Retail Media Vibes. So we're going to do bold vibes. So Toby, I know you haven't played bold vibes before, but basically this is how it goes. I'm going to throw out some bold statements about retail media, some marketing, and just some other stuff as well. You're going to have to give me your gut reaction to these statements. I have 8 statements today. I want, just quick answers, no overthinking, just like, what are your thoughts? All right. Okay. All right. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. All right. First one, the CD AOL used to get people to sign up for internet was the best marketing ever.
Agree.
All right. CES is the best conference for the retail media industry because of timing, location, and attendees.
Disagree. I hate that it's at the beginning of the year.
ChatGPT will be more popular for new product discovery than TikTok.
Ooh, disagree.
LLMs will make more money from affiliate fees than from advertising this year.
Agree.
More retail media networks will be shut down than are created this year.
Agree. Unfortunately, I agree with that.
Man, I'm bringing the heat. I'm telling you. All right. AI-generated ads will become more prevalent and no one will care.
Also agree. Yeah, I think people will care in the beginning. I think within a year, no one will give a crap.
All right. AI will have a bigger financial impact for retailers in the supply chain than retail media.
I also agree with that. Very much agree.
And finally, the last one, Retail Media Vibes will be nominated for a Golden Globe this coming season.
Oh, 100%.
All right. Woo.
Easiest question of the bunch.
Easiest question. Good job. Appreciate you going through bold vibes with me, Toby. Appreciate that. So, all right, we are at the wrap for this episode of Retail Media Vibes. I want a huge thanks to Toby for jumping on and chatting it up with me today. So, how was it, Toby? How'd you think? Yeah,
fantastic. I really appreciate you having me on. I love this type of conversation, and always happy to have more.
Absolutely. So anything you want to shout out or plug before we wrap today?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Main thing I would love to shout out is just you'll be seeing some news on LinkedIn here in the coming weeks. But I am actually launching my own consultancy practice, which has officially kicked off, kind of a more dark mode for the last few months. But Willse McLean Advisory will be my consulting practice that I'll be helping brands and agencies better understand the landscape, how to be able to support their clients, or for brands, how to be able to better structure yourselves and have the right agency partnerships. So looking forward to being able to help brands and agencies be able to really accelerate in this age of agentic commerce and what is a rapidly evolving landscape.
Awesome. So thanks for listening. And as always, I promise to do better next time. BV out.